Hey everybody, I'm Brian Murray. I'm a firefighter here locally. Second generation firefighter. Been doing it nearly 2 decades. Strong union advocate for firefighters throughout the country. Was involved heavily post strike and after the strikes, before the strikes and after the strikes. We had to go on strike over terms and conditions and stuff like that, and that obviously feeds into the mental health aspect of why I'm here. Before the strikes, we couldn't get any time off. Here locally, we had 6 guys running the station for over a year with very little time off. So that took its toll on people's families and their relationships at home and stuff like that. As I said, I'm a second generation firefighter. My father, Brian Murray Sr. and Marco Shaughnessy, he was killed in the line of duty in 2007. And that inspired me to drive on and effect change within the service.
What change was needed? What happened?
There was staffing, money, terms and conditions. Firefighters in this country were in a post-World War II system. And that's only starting to change now. We have much more time off, much more better terms and conditions, pensions. It's a livable wage now, whereas before it was a struggle. And again, that feeds into anything at home. With that, as I said, 2 decades in the job, thousands of calls from industrial fires to domestic fires, suicides, traumatic suicides. We see people on the worst day of their lives, you know. I suppose it's a difficult job, but it's also the best job in the world. There's a paradox to it. People only ever see the lights and the Instagram reels and the cool shit, you know, the big flames and all. But there's a very, very darker side underneath it as well. When firefighters or first responders at all have too much time to think, it can be bad for them. Downtime sometimes can be bad, especially if you don't have the right supports in place and you're not, I suppose, they train you to be effective as a firefighter or a first responder. They teach you to service your equipment, they teach you to service and do all these amazing things, swift water rescue, mountain rescue, extrications from cars, medical calls, but they don't teach you to look after yourself, your mind. And I really do think that from a recruit stage that's something that they need to look at, is to teach people that there is another side to this job, that it's not all, you know, what you see on TV.
Yeah, do you think, like, there's a paradox there where what makes you a good firefighter is the fact that you can switch off and just, like, act, whereas, like you said, then if you have too much time off, then you have time to think, and I think you spoke to me before about, you know, firefighters always trying to chase that high outside of work then after.
Yeah, there's definitely an identity thing within that. So I see a lot of guys that are retired that I talk to quite a lot. For some reason they come to me, I don't know why. But after they retire, they seem to have an identity problem. It's like they're a firefighter through and through all their life, or a first responder, or a guard, or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden that stops. And I think that we need to get better through the unions, definitely, at giving these people supports after their career has ended, instead of it just they're here today, they're gone, you know. And that's something that we definitely need to look at across the board, across the state and across the world, really. Firefighting's a small community. I have friends in New York, I have friends all around the world, in the UK, and the stats are not great for firefighters and their mental health. So.
No, thanks, Brian. You're okay. Hi, my name is Hayley Murphy. I am the outreach coordinator for a Bray Women's Refuge and a new Wicklow Domestic Violence Supports. So I have been working with domestic abuse for on and off 22 years. I started off in domestic abuse, then worked with kids in care for 10 years, and then it always brought me back to where my passion was, and that was a domestic abuse. I suppose when we think of abuse, we automatically think of bruises, broken arms, the visible bruises. But in relation to mental health, I think it's the emotional abuse and the psychological abuse that cuts deep. It just gets straight into your head and it strips you of everything that you possibly can. I suppose anyone that knows me, I'm a fighter. I am not used to this. I work behind the scenes. I want to ensure that any victim becomes a survivor. they don't become another statistic, that every barrier possible is taken away. And if I have to scream and shout from the rooftops to do that, unlike a fireman, we don't have sirens, we don't have Instagram posts, because still in Ireland, a domestic abuse is seen as behind doors. It's what happens inside. It's a domestic. We better not get involved. Although laws have changed and the government, it's bone of contention, will put in laws to protect the victims where they're actually just trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. It doesn't fit. So I would see our service as the surfboard that carries a victim through the worst stage of their lives. And I think, like what Brian was saying, as a frontline worker and working with trauma the whole time, you never get used to seeing someone so powerless and so vulnerable. And when they turn to a system that's supposed to be there to protect them, that system further abuses them. So yeah, when I took this job up, I had the privilege of creating a service that wasn't there. I was able to, from my own experiences and friends' experiences and family's experiences, I was able to see the gaps and build a service that, it's amazing. It's amazing, and amazing staff that also have the same drive that I have.
And can you just touch on maybe a typical client that you would work with? Because I think when people think of domestic abuse, they'll just think about physical violence as well, but kind of other cases that you would work on a day-to-day basis.
Every case that we did, to give you an example, I was only doing the stats for Cuan there the other day. Cuan is the organisation within the Department of Justice, and they want all our stats. So in January, the age range that we dealt with was the youngest was 20 and the eldest was 86. You never think of an 86-year-old being abused. We would deal with emotional abuse, as I said, physical abuse, sexual abuse, coercive control. The cases could range, and it's very hard, I suppose, if you don't have a bruise, if you don't have a broken arm, it's very hard to come out and say, I'm being emotionally abused, because you don't know what emotional abuse is. And when we're talking about mental health and young people with mental health issues, and we're told from a young age, you don't hit back, you don't do this, you talk about emotions, but we're not educated on what emotional abuse is. What does that feel like? To feel like you're trapped in a situation that you've no way out. It's a prison. It's a mental and psychological prison. But the difference is, it's not done by a stranger. It's done by someone that you love. It's done by someone that, it could be your husband, your wife, because there is male victims of domestic abuse. What is supposed to feel safe is a nightmare, and you try and shape yourself to become a person that the person you love wants you to be. But no matter how much you change your shape, you're never going to fit into that mold, because the mold constantly changes. So we could have, I remember one of the first cases that I worked with all those years ago, and she came into the refuge because I worked in the refuge first, and her husband was a pilot. He worked for Aer Lingus, and even still when I go and get on an Aer Lingus plane, I go, I hope that fucker's not driving this plane. But this made emotional abuse really hit with me, and I remember she was sitting with me and she was like, I don't deserve to be here. And I was like, why do you think you don't deserve to be here? And she said, because he isn't hitting me. But this woman couldn't drive her car because he clocked the mileage every single morning. So he knew how many miles it was for her to go to school and come back. She wasn't able to see her mum. And if she had to go and see her mum, she had to walk for miles and miles and miles because the car was clocked. She wasn't able to spend money. She wasn't able to buy a bra for herself. She wasn't even be able to buy anything because he controlled every single penny. Where to the outside world, isn't your husband great? He goes shopping with you every week. She was limited from absolutely everybody, but she didn't see it as abuse. She just felt that this isn't right.
Would them victims be in denial almost about what's going on, or it's just not awareness?
I don't think it's denial. I think it becomes normal.
Yeah.
So we are victims of normalising stuff. And if we're going back to even what the other panellists were talking about, is even when it comes to eating disorders, self-harming, it becomes normal to be on the phone all the time. It becomes normal. Oh, it's great. He's my knight in shining armor. He's protecting me. He's, like wants us to have my password. Behaviors become normal, and we're afraid to actually question them, because then when you question them, you may think that you're mad. So if you question something, I'm only doing it because I love you. I'm only doing it because of this, or, it's because of my childhood. And we can blame our past trauma for our behaviour without taking accountability for it.
Oscar, go ahead.
It's going to be a short 5 minutes, Carl, but I'm Oscar. I work up in Bray Travellers Community Development Group, so I work with travellers throughout Bray, kind of surrounding towns. My work will be all around housing, accommodation and homelessness, so that can vary from anything from getting works done to houses to families living long-term homelessness. So I guess my role would have been funded originally because they would have noticed. So Sláintecare did a study and they noticed that travellers in Bray specifically were having really poor health outcomes compared to the rest of the country and compared to Wicklow. And there's a much bigger traveller population in Wicklow, Rathnew, and they were having much better outcomes. Whereas in Bray, I'd be working with about 450-ish individuals in the kind of Bray, Kilmac, Greystones areas, and the life expectancy was massively shorter. Chronic health was way shorter.
Why was it shorter then?
It's a complicated one because it's not a one answer thing. In Bray, we had a lot more addiction than they would have in Wicklow. We'd have a lot more people going in and out of prisons than they would in Wicklow, and that presents its own challenges. Now, addiction was one part of it, but typically we would lose maybe 3, 4, 5 individuals in Bray, traveller individuals, to addiction or drug related deaths every year. But it comes down to things like housing conditions, and that's obviously a big part of my role, particularly up in Fossrow. We have 3, 4 generations living in one home. There's one house where we have a 2-bed and we have 16 people living in the 2-bed. That's not uncommon, So obviously there's an impact on your mental health with that. We're not supposed to live like that. You're not supposed to have this many people living together and not able to have your own lives. And culturally, travellers would have big families. I work with lots of people that have 7, 8, 9 children, and 3 generations of big families in one home is just it's not what anyone's meant to live like. But then you also have the physical impact on the home. These homes are designed for 3, 4 people, so we have really serious issues with mould, and then that leads on to other health complications. Like our rates of COPD and things, asthma would be really high because of the living environment. So it's really multifaceted. There's no one answer to it, but it was a real issue that they were seeing with travellers in the Bray and surrounding areas. So
yeah, I think I'm going to stick with you, Oscar. And I'm just going to. So obviously, there's much higher suicide rates among the travelling community compared to other people. So, but why is there so little public outrage or political action around it? To be honest, it was only after speaking to you that I understood the higher rates in travelling community compared to suicide.
So
why is that?
It's a hard one to say. So I think it's about 11-12% of all deaths in travellers are suicide. So that's about 6.5 times higher than the settled community. It's a big number. Yeah. There's kind of 2 aspects to it. One is shame within the traveller community themselves. A lot of it is kind of a shame-based culture. And I'll say this a million times tonight, I'm not a traveller. I don't speak on behalf of travellers. I just speak of my experience working with them over the last 5 years. But there is a real shame in the traveller community around mental health and suicide, and I guess that's why we would see a lot of addiction, because particularly from men and women as well. Actually, there's a lot of women in addiction as well, and it's not being able to speak about your mental health, not having someone you can go to. It wouldn't be something that now it is more, and it's definitely changing, but it wouldn't has been as openly spoken about. And that goes on, and it only can get to a certain point, and then someone might take their own life as well. So, but then obviously there's massive discrimination towards travellers, and I would have worked in youth work before. I was only saying this the other day to someone that we would have done a lot of work with apprenticeships, and I'd know loads of lads in trades and stuff. They'd always give the lads an apprenticeship, and I've a young traveller lad. He's one of the most amazing young lads. He's so reliable, really decent, brilliant family, loads of support around him, and I asked someone to give him a bit of work with him as a plumber, and he saw the CV. And now he's loads on his CV. He's a really talented young lad, you know. And he looked at me and he said, Morehouse. And I said, yeah, but I'd vouch for him 100%. And he said, no, not a chance. He said, all my copper's going to be nicked. And that's, you know, one of the biggest things that we have, I do a lot of work with the young lads, and they genuinely want to work, you know, and they're more like travellers would have culturally kind of been self-employed, you know, and that's where you get the kind of pave and roof and all that type of stuff. But a lot of travellers now are willing to work anywhere. They'll work for anyone, and we just can't get them employment. They can't get employment, and it's the second name. And they're so easily identified. Even before they step in front of you, you see, you know, the common names around here, Morehouse, Connors, and that's, you know.
How do you tackle that as a society if people aren't willing to?
I'm trying to figure that out. No, look, in fairness, I think a lot of people would be more open to being open. Yeah. Like, I had a really good meeting there the other day with a lot of the staff from the Department of Social Protection, and they were more or less saying the same as me. We want to do everything we can, and in fairness, they've been really helpful. There's loads of great initiatives, you know, for people who've been out of work. There's great initiatives for getting travellers into work, and a lot of employers don't know about them. So even like Jobs Plus, like if you're out of work for 2 years and you have a company, you take someone on to work for you who's been out of work for 2 years, you're given 10 grand straight away. No questions asked. There's these kind of, obviously there's things like back to education allowance, there's work experience program allowances that will top up someone's social welfare, and the employer will get a benefit as well. And these are all really good initiatives that I think maybe need to be pushed a little bit more, because, you know, I'm a reference for all the lads, and I would always give an honest reference. I had someone ring me before saying, is he reliable? And I said, no. So he's a lovely young lad, but no, he's not reliable, you know.
We'll cut that.
But I told him I'd say it. I said, don't put me as a reference. But you know, just a lot of these lads and girls as well, because there's more traveller women working now. Yeah. If someone gave them a chance and saw the ability they have, like these are young lads that are far smarter than me, you know, and more able than me. And if they were given that first chance, they'd fly it, you know.
Brian, I'll go back to you. So, international evidence shows firefighters are 3 times more likely to die by suicide than the general population, and Irish firefighters and unions report similar patterns here, and I presume you're probably the same. Why do you think firefighters are at higher risk?
Yeah, it's a terrible statistic we have. It is a worldwide study. It's there. The UK did one recently as well, and the same stats were there. Yeah. I'm not sure the Irish have done. No, again, we're slightly behind with that. I suppose the reason it is it's the accumulative trauma that we witness, the calls, the stress, a lot of attending suicides, attending car accidents, again, traumatic suicides. They could be anything from a hanging to somebody that goes under a train.
Is that something that you experience?
Quite a lot, yeah. We do get suicide calls a lot. Yeah. We don't talk about them. Obviously, you don't publicise. No. It's kept quiet. And again, there is a stigma around it, both in civilian life as well as firefighting, military, Gardaí. It's not spoken about enough, I think, you know. But the trauma of all the calls that we witness over decades, or some people could be 20, 30 years in the job. Yeah. And again, these are calls, you don't just attend them, you absorb them. Yeah. You know, like you go home, even if it's a domestic fire somewhere, and you're kind of lying there sometimes thinking, could I have done this better? Could I have done that better? When in reality, you could have done nothing. You know, it was what it was. That's where I think that a lot of guys around the world struggle with it. Yeah,
and I asked you about, is there support systems for firefighters, and you said that there was, but the biggest issue is that people don't take advantage of them.
Yeah, there is supports there. We have critical incident stress management. We're given a couple of sessions a year. Yeah. Again, it's probably not enough, but I would say that ourselves in the union are responsible for that. Yeah. That we need to be pushing it more on our members. Yeah. As I said to you before, firefighting is seen as quite a masculine job. In reality, we're just normal people. So we feel the same as everyone else. So it's getting firemen, and I think the newer generation are better at it than us, because they are opening up and talking about things they've seen, whereas my generation and older, again, my father's generation, was just crack on with it. Yeah. You know, and that's the completely wrong way. You know, you can't keep letting things build up on you.
Yeah. Was there anything, let's say, so you've been in the fire service a long time, so is there any ways that have helped you to cope with incidents that you've seen, besides maybe even talk therapy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very, very lucky. I have great support around me. I've got great gym colleagues. There's a couple of them here today laughing at me there, no doubt. I train a lot. That helps me. I believe, you know, in keeping physically fit, that helps you keep mentally fit. But I definitely think that men in general need to check themselves every now and then. I mean, you'll spend a few €100 on a set of tyres for your car, but you won't sit and actually think and go and seek help if you need it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not that expensive anymore when you've great charities like this. There's really no excuse anymore for us to sit in the dark and let our heads get the better of us.
Hayley, I'll go to you now. Can you explain the process a victim of domestic abuse faces when kind of coming forward, and why the journey is often made more difficult than it needs to be? See, I know we spoke about this.
The legal process, or the process or the legal
Yeah.
process?
And I think all the systems that are kind of from maybe going down to the Gardaí to the court system and maybe all of that.
So I suppose in Ireland we have a system that we're relying on a legal system to fix a social system, if that makes sense. So a domestic abuse, I suppose we're talking about emotional and psychological abuse. It's not like if you go out on a Saturday night and you're in a pub and someone hits you a punch and the CCTV and the guards come and arrest them and, you know, it goes to court and blah, blah, blah. It's not the same, but it's treated the same in a legal system. So if you go to court, you can apply for an order, which everyone's aware of. You can get a protection order, safety order, barring order, and they come in different tiers. So it depends on, we go back to the Constitution, so the owner of the house and the marriage, and that's protected within our Constitution, which hasn't changed. So that creates barriers then for people who are going to court. So if you don't own a property, or if you aren't married, you can't get a barring order. You can only get a safety order. And I don't want to minimize any orders, but I kind of call a safety order like a paper shield. You can break through it, you know. Again, it comes down to evidence. But in Ireland, we've a huge issues with the legal system, in the sense that the victim is also the witness. So if you are a victim of crime, you're also the witness of that crime. So the system doesn't protect the victims. So the victim goes into court, they haven't got solicitors, they haven't got barristers, they've got the DPP is the one that's bringing the prosecution to court, and victims turn up and they're caught in a whirlwind that, excuse the French, don't know their arse from their elbow. Like, they arrive to court, they want to get a solicitor, there's no one there to explain to them how the whole system works. There's no one there to explain that they have to stand up and give evidence, so if they don't go and give evidence, well, then there's no case. And as we spoke about, it's not just a case against a stranger, it's a case against someone that you love, or someone that you did love, and that there's kids involved, there's houses involved. So it's not just that simple. Like, the barriers are huge. You could go down to your Garda station and report a crime, and, you know, coercive control became a crime in Ireland in 2018. But what is coercive control? No one can identify coercive control. So if you go into the Garda station and say, you know, I'm being coercive controlled, well, then prove it. But how can you prove a look? So coercive control is so, it's like cancer. You can't see it. It eats you up inside. So if you're trying to sit there and explain to a normal member of the Gardaí, and no offence to them, but like Brian, they could be coming back from a car crash, they could be coming back from telling someone that their loved one has died, they could be coming back from a drugs raid, and then you got a woman coming in that wants to report, I'm being coercively controlled, my husband doesn't do this, or he gives me a look, or, you know, I'm not allowed to have this, and they look and go, oh, you know what, come back tomorrow. Or, you know, like the stories I've heard from women who've gone in to make statements, and I'm very lucky. As I said, I've got an amazing team around me, and there's an amazing members of the Gardaí. But at the end of the day, you know, I go in, I do training with the Gardaí, and I'm like, the woman or the person that's coming to make that statement to you, the like stats are very clear. On average, they've been abused 33 times before they plucked up the courage for you to minimize what they're going through. Like I had a woman that I worked with, just not going to go into details of it, but she had been through horrific abuse, and she was sexually assaulted by her husband for years. And I worked with her for a long time, and eventually she decided through her support that she was going to go and make a statement. And I'd met her before she went into the Garda station. We'd done a whole plan, and then she rings me 5 minutes later in tears crying, and I'm like, what's wrong? And she knocked on the hatch, and the guard answered it, and she said, I want to make a statement about abuse from my husband. And he went, can you come back tomorrow? You know, I'm just about to go off shift. And she went, yeah, no problem, and went out. And she rang me, and she was in tears crying, and I'm like, oh my God. Now, anyone that knows me, I did kick up a fuss, and I rang the superintendent, and I ended up getting a member of Gardaí to come down to our office and take her statement. But I shouldn't have to do that. Yeah. I shouldn't have to be the one that has to go into the judge and say, Judge, you know, you've been a bit harsh on that woman, you know, or go to solicitors. And, you know, the law is very black and white, but emotional abuse and domestic abuse is grey, and the system doesn't allow for that, you know. And the fact that counsellors' notes can still be brought into play when it comes to a rape case, or, you know, that's her personal. So now women are coming for counselling, and they're like, I don't really want to say, because in case the notes are being brought. So a safe space for them has become a weapon. So no matter which way a victim turns, they're being weaponized by the system that's there to protect them, when in fact the system can further abuse them.
In what ways can the system be improved so they don't have to go through that?
They need to be victim focused.
Yeah.
Victim focused is stop victim blaming. Basically, so victim focused is a woman or man who comes to court to get an order shouldn't have to face their like abuser. You know, they should be able to. Every day of the week it happens. Every day of the week. You know, I was in court last Tuesday, and I don't think there's ever one day that I walk out of court and don't be annoyed. There's not one day I walk out and go, oh, justice was served. Never. I cannot honestly put my hand on the heart and say that that's ever happened in the 11 years I'm working up in court, that I go like, because it isn't justice. You know, they are cross-examined, they're questioned, you know, they have to provide mental health records, they're accused of parent alienation, and that's frustrating. So the system that should be there and needs to change. Victims should be entitled to legal representation that's free. You know, like a perpetrator, like I can beat the crap out of my partner and I can go in and get free legal aid. But if I want a solicitor, I have to pay 750, 900 euro per day to have a solicitor there with me. That's if it's allowed. We need to stop looking at victims to come up with the solutions. We need to start looking at perpetrators. You know, the fact that someone could be found guilty of domestic abuse, and I say guilty because if someone's granted a court order, there's been a whole trial, it could be a 2 or 3 hour hearing, yet they can still have access to their kids without going to a perpetrator program. So how do we break the cycle? How do we protect the kids? Because the kids are silent in every aspect of it, and they're also weaponized. We need stricter prison sentences for perpetrators, and I think we've seen that with that amazing woman that came forward that was abused by her husband, who was a member of An Garda Síochána. And I think we all need to stop being naive to the fact that it only happens to people in a council estate, or well, she's to blame, she could just leave him, you know, as if leaving is as easy as that. Like, if it was easy to leave, every victim would leave. We need to look at housing, we need to look at everything, every area of society we need to look at, you know, and until we really start looking at it from victim focus as to what's best for her and not what is best for our constitution or what's best for the legal system or what's best for the Gardaí or whatever, area you look at, like even our courts, like sitting in court the other day till 7 o'clock at night. You know, I think the latest I ever left Bray Court was 10 to 11 at night time. Like, what court sits at 10 to 11 at night? Like, we had women sitting there that came to court and applied for a domestic violence order, which are ex parte, and they were left to the end of the day. And then the judge said, you know what, I'm going, you need to come back on Tuesday. And they haven't been heard. So they were sent home and they have to come back on Tuesday to see the judge to get their order, where they should be imminent. They should be given priority, and they're not given priority. The family law bill was supposed to come in, where courts were family orientated, and that, you know, judges were experienced and specialised. That hasn't happened. So you could have the same judge that could be sitting there and he's hearing a criminal case, park and fine case, a young lad that was caught with enough for a joint that you have everyone fighting for. You could have anything, and then he comes up with a domestic abuse and he's in bad form and he's had a shit day, and he just gives that poor victim a hard time, asking, well, why are you only coming now, and blah, blah, blah. And then they're left sitting in court all day long with kids. There's no creche, there's no childcare. We have toys up in the room and we're left to look after the kids because kids can't go into the courtroom. So it's not fit for purpose. It's not fit for victims. It's not fit for like families, and it's certainly not fit for kids. Sorry, that was very long-winded.
And you touched on homes there as well. Oscar, I wanted to bring you in and talk to you about. We had a discussion, and you said that obviously people think that the first solution for homelessness is to give someone a house, but there's a lot of steps in between that. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. So we'd work with a lot of people who've been in long-term homelessness, have never been in their houses or never been in their own homes. And in Wicklow, really, we have a real lack of emergency accommodation. I'd say, Hayley, obviously you would see that a lot in your work. And I'm not for 1 second blaming the council, actually. I have a really good relationship with the homeless team, with the housing staff, and they're kind of, I'm blaming central government, you know, for the funding in order to put these funding applications in to buy places. But like, if you have someone that's never lived in a home, that's never had the capacity to do these things, and we were talking outside with Chloe as well about people leaving care. You know, if you've come from a situation where everything's been done for you, you've been supported with everything, and then say if you're leaving care, you get to 18, they say, right, on you go. You don't know how to use your washing machine, you haven't had to cook, you haven't had to budget, you know, you've never had to set up your Wi-Fi bills and stuff. And similarly, like with long-term homelessness, and we'd see it a lot with people in addiction, that, you know, they might say, look, if I just get a home, I'd be grand, that's the only thing I need, because they're homeless. But you're going from 0 to 100 there. You've never had to do all these other little things. And I wouldn't hold them up now as the standards that we should be aiming for, but the UK at least does have a lot more kind of supported living facilities. So, you know, if you've come from long-term homelessness, or you're coming through or are in addiction, you might have somewhere where you could go where you're supported. There's social workers or there's staff there, family support staff, and you kind of prove yourself through that. Then you could go into your own home. You still might have more supports. Whereas in Ireland, if you're lucky enough to get a home, it's very much just you're left to your own devices. Now, there are things like Housing First, or, you know, Hale referrals with mental health issues, but Housing First is kind of in a bit of a tizzy at the minute. It's not really.
There's no Housing First in Wicklow anymore.
Yeah.
That's gone.
Yeah, but like there's very little, you know, in terms of and like one thing that we see is just someone getting a tenancy, the tenancy failing. That didn't work out because my family aren't close by. I'm not in the right area. I just need to live here. Move over. Same thing happens again, and there's no addressing it. There's no, you know, people can't realise it's not a house I need all this other work done first. You kind of touched on it in the first panel about like a wraparound support network of all these different things, and I guess in my job that's what we tried to do, you know. And we'd have our addiction staff, we'd link in with the guards, we'd link in with different kind of support services and BCAT and the likes. And when someone moves into a home that is going to need a lot more support, we'd have a table of people there sitting down and saying, right, what has this person done for this person? What has this person done? What have we done? What are we missing? What do we need to do? But that's just something that we don't really see. And like, I guess the first step really would be emergency accommodation or more flexible, like imagining housing more flexibly in the country, you know. Like, could we have somewhere where we have your own front door units and you live here for a year, but there is support, and then maybe move on to your own unit, you know. But at the moment, it's kind of homelessness, a house, that's it, and there's nothing in between.
Is there a shortage of emergency?
It's massive.
None?
There's massive. Yeah, it's I can't get beds for anyone. Do you know, there's when it gets to kind of cold weather, there was beds this year, so the council would have a cold weather initiative for really cold nights, and there were beds this year. Now I know they were snapped up, but in terms of actually housing people in emergency accommodation, there's just nothing. There's
No, and
you'd
like
see it as well, like
we'd see that a lot. Like, we've got a family that we're working with that's been homeless for 15 months, and she was offered a B&B down in Courtown, I think is one of the only B&Bs. And that's the issue, is that it's self-accommodation vouchers, which is great. Another policy that looks great on paper. Oh yeah, the council will pay €50 a night towards a B&B or €60 a night towards a B&B. Okay, give me a B&B that's going to take that. There isn't any.
Those self-accom vouchers. So it's Wicklow will give you a voucher at £70 a night.
Yeah.
So we had someone coming home from prison recently. Now there's kind of 7 places between. They're not in Bray anymore. Now in Bray will take them, but in Wicklow, Waterford, Kilkenny, there's kind of 7 that will take them. Between those 3 counties.
And Rathrum, I think, as well.
Yeah. And in fairness, Rathrum was the only one that said, yeah, we do still take them, but we've no room. We've had people living here in B&B accommodation up to 3 years. And so we had someone coming home from prison, 48 places I rang between Kilkenny, Dublin city centre, just saying, do you take them? No, nowhere takes them. And they were brought in not as a means of being helpful, but as that's them meeting their legal obligation.
A tick box.
So if you have a legal obligation to provide emergency accommodation to someone who needs it, but by offering financial kind of, you know, like in terms of the voucher, you're actually meeting that legal obligation. Because if you can't provide it, you're giving them the means to do that. But if nowhere takes them, and like it's the same as HAP, like. The property prices are skyrocketing. HAP hasn't gone up.
HAP,
like,
I think it's $1,500 a month.
It depends on depends on what. So like I'm HAP approved. I'm on the housing list. I can get £900 a month towards my rent, but they won't let you go over. Like my maximum kind of be 1,200 based on your income and stuff. So where can you find somewhere to rent for 1,200? That firstly will take HAP anyways. You know what I mean? But there's just no provision of any of these things, you know. But
and if we're finding that as professionals, then how is the most vulnerable people finding access
as
and
people who can advocate
exactly.
on other people's behalf, and we know the systems, we know the language. Like if you're sending, and like a lot of the people similar to yourself that I work with, they don't have one trauma, they have fucking it's just chaos, you know. Like you'd have addiction in the home, you'd have children with disabilities, you have domestic abuse, you have, you know, kind of precarious housing, you have so many things going on. And then, you know, if they're finding themselves in a situation of homelessness and you're saying, okay, we'll ring all the B&Bs, you know, around the country and see who takes them, you know. And like again, a lot of the people I work with can't read and write, and Wicklow County Council might be sending you an email with really detailed legal things on it, and they're coming to me saying, what the fuck am I supposed to do? And I'm pulling my hair out, well, what's left of me hair, like I'm pulling that out, you know, in terms as someone who knows these systems. So if you can't read or you have all these other stresses going on, good luck. Like
Forget about it. I actually remember sitting down in Wicklow County Council because a woman was staying up in their refuge, and you know, we only have 7 bedrooms. We're full 100% of the time. We never have a room, and most of the backlog is down to homelessness. And a woman was there for months, her and her 4 kids, and I went down to Wicklow County Council. She was presenting the homeless, and they weren't doing nothing with her. Just said no, and I said all right. So for 4 days we went down with her 4 kids with Peppa Pig on full blast to annoy the council that much. On the 4th, we got chippers delivered. the whole council, and I'm very blessed, the only instruction my manager had was don't leave in handcuffs. I said, no, promise you I won't. I need my Garda vetting. So I knew where to push the line. But I'm like, we had to sit there for 4 days before she was given homeless account. Everything's a fight, and it shouldn't have to be a fight. And I think as a professional working in this area, and I think Brian would agree, and it's the very same with Oscar, is that if us as professionals are finding a fight, then how the hell are people finding it that aren't linked in with any service?
Yeah.
You know, everything's a battle.
I'm going to leave one more question for all of you to answer in your own way. So basically, to help the audience understand what it's really like to work in your role. I'm just a personal trainer, so I get to see the best people every day. So I don't know how you do it, but could you share maybe like a day or a moment that was emotionally overwhelming, or something that you carried
What are you
home?
looking at me for?
Go, Oscar.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. You have to not let yourself be overwhelmed.
Is that difficult to do though when you hear those stories? You basically left
Well,
it
like,
to-
yeah, but it's not even hearing those stories. It's
Seeing.
like we're a drop-in service. I have people coming into me every single day. I have people ringing me on my phone, and the phone I can deal with because you can hang that up eventually and you can, calm someone down on the phone. But it's when someone comes into you who's, going through addiction or going through domestic violence, and they're saying like, what am I supposed to do? And you look at them and you say,
You know,
I don't know. Do you know what I mean? All you like, it is tough, and like I see the worst of people. I see them at their lowest point, but I see the best of people. I see, like, I work with so many really funny, amazing people. Like, I've real characters that come into me. And like, I sometimes have to remind myself they're not my friends. Like, you often do just ring someone. And you say, I've not up there. I thought I'd ring you now. I told you I'd ring you this week. Yeah. And they say, oh, right, why are you ringing me? And it's like,
fuck off, Oscar.
yeah, you do forget, like, oh, actually, sorry, I'm actually your house and key worker. I'm not, like, or you'd say something, you'd say, oh, it was your young lad's birthday. Like, tell him I said happy birthday. And you're like, oh, no, that's actually not my job. But, I just hope that as I get older, I don't become cold to it. And I think that's the thing that people find hard. When you're in a job and you're seeing the hardest of situations for 30, 40, 50 years, you do become cold to it. There's a fancy word for it that I can't remember. Yeah, compassionate fatigue, I think is but that's just what I hope I don't get to. But when you see that so often, I'm sure you will get to that point. But I do work with great people, and I do lots of fun things in work as well, and I do get to meet a lot of good people. But I don't know how you cope with it when you see them at the worst. Like, I just sit in the car and leave the radio off, and when you're driving home, just leave the radio off and sit in the driveway for a bit, and then I don't know, you just get on with it then, don't you? But I've no magic answer for that one.
No, that's all right.
Hayley might, she's a lot more knowledgeable. Yeah.
I wouldn't say knowledgeable. I would like to. You don't become immune to it. I think in all the years that I'm working in this job, there's not a day that goes by that I'm not heartbroken by the stories that we hear. But I suppose what makes me smile through it all is when a woman does get the freedom. And the freedom isn't always what we perceive as freedom. Is the freedom from the mind, is when you sit with a woman and you do that psychoeducational work and she realises, I'm actually not fucking mad. I am a good mother. I am not what he told me that I was. That's liberating for us as an organisation, and it's liberating for them. I suppose I've learned techniques. I have a little technique, and I do say to my clients, no, you're in the box at Glenada Downs. So when I'm driving home, I kind of in my head put my clients in boxes and say, okay, I'm leaving you here now till tomorrow. I'm leaving you here. And Glenada Downs is my cut-off because I lose signal. Because it's Glenada Downs. East Coast FM goes on. But it's that psychological, you have to switch off. Like, if you don't switch off, you're going to reach burnout. If you don't have a mechanism, I'm very lucky. I love running. My partner, I'll come in the door, put the headphones on, and I could be gone. Like, I could go up to Wicklow Mountains and I might come back 4 hours later. God only knows when I'm going to come back. And the gym for me, but it is learning that resilience to it isn't you. These people have learned to survive. They're alive, and manage to stay alive and not be murdered before they met you. So they know how to keep themselves safe. It's not down to you to keep them safe. It's down to you to support them and listen to them. So it's knowing your own limitations. And yeah, staying in your lane. Like if I have someone that's homeless, yes, I sit in the homeless action team, but homelessness is not my lane. If I have someone that's in addiction, where a lot of women are in addiction, a lot of women get turned to addiction because that's the only way you cope and it's the only way living with it. That's not my lane. So I refer them to BCAT or other addiction services. The mental health one is the huge one because not many psychotherapists have an understanding of a domestic abuse and the impact it has on them, which is why I'm back in college. I'm a glutton for college. But yeah, so it's learning that and learning to release it.
Is there, between the two things that you both said, is there a little bit of a push and pull between obviously setting them boundaries in place and then not becoming cold to your job?
Yeah, I find it really hard. I'm a devil for keeping the work phone on the weekend or my weeks
Oh
off.
no.
Like I'm off. I do.
Experience.
Yeah.
Come back to me in 10 years' time and tell me you're doing that.
Like I'm off next week and I felt a real guilt over being off now next week, do you know what I mean? Like it's time in lieu, I'm entitled to it.
Yeah, of course.
Do you know, but just, you know, when I know someone's coming in to give me something on the Tuesday and I was thinking, right, well, I pop in, just get that form on Tuesday and then go back home. And then I know if I went in on the Tuesday, I'd be there the whole day and then, do you know, but bits of that, yeah, like I do find it hard sometimes to just completely switch off, and you can keep yourself busy when you get home.
Yeah.
I'll just start cooking random stuff and cooking everything, and then I have 4 dinners cooked, like, you know. But I find
Yeah, we're going to the Oscars house for dinner.
I wouldn't trust my cooking now, but like it's sometimes I do wake up during the night and I'm not worrying about someone, but I said, geez, if I put that person in that house and I could get that person moved there, I've solved it. But it's that's what I find hard anyway, is just switching it off completely. But
I think it comes with experience
Yeah,
as well, that
yeah.
I suppose when I initially started, I would have been like you, had the
Yeah.
work phone on all the time. And then I just found like, I think there's a line, am I empowering or disempowering someone? So by me having my work phone all the time on, I'm disempowering and I'm just taking over from where the abuser left. So I'm not instilling that empowerment, and I'm all about empowerment and women's rights. And so I think I learned, and I think COVID taught me a lot. I think it's the only positive thing about COVID.
What way?
That, before COVID, I would have been like Oscar, I would have had the phone on all the time, would have been up in the court the whole time, would have been, I kind of felt like everything was on my shoulders. And then COVID happened and I couldn't see that person. I couldn't pop into the office. I couldn't ring them. It was an abuser's ideal scenario. They had their victim in the house. The kids weren't in school. There was no social workers. There was no one knocking the door. And I had to wait for them to reach out to me.
Yeah.
And I think the first few months of COVID, I was like a baby out of a swaddle. I wasn't able to sleep. I was worrying about all of the clients and I was worrying about everyone, worrying about the staff. And then as time went on, I was like, okay, I'm turning on the radio. There's no murders. There's no, and it kind of instilled. And then when I did get to talk to women, I was asking them how they were coping and how they were managing. It was like, okay, they listened. They were able to manage. So I think that kind of gave a bit that, I am allowed to go on holidays. Like if I don't fill my emotional cup, if I don't look after me, because there's no one there for me, work-wise, home-wise, yeah, there is. And sometimes I think they wish they weren't because they sometimes get the brunt of it. But, you have to look after yourself. And it's not, and I know we spoke about it before. It's not, I think we have a culture, and I was speaking to one of the panelists about it as well. Oh, she's just full of herself, or she's this, or they're that. It's like, no, this is called self-care. It's not called like vanity or being vain. I think we underestimate self-care.
Is there a high burnout in your careers because of people not being able to kind of set boundaries and switch off and have self-care?
I think it comes down to the management and it comes down to the culture. And as like Brian was saying with the fire brigade and the culture within that, I think it's about having conversations and leading by example. I would say to all the staff that I work with, leave your work phone in the car. I will have my work phone on me if I have a very high risk case that this woman needs support, and I would give her permission to ring my work phone. Then it's my responsibility to have it with me. It's only if it's a high risk case or there's something going on that I feel she needs that support, because I'm her only support network, which we spoke about before. But there is a huge burnout, but it does come down to the culture, that you're working in, and to be allowed, and I'm sure it's the same in your place as well, like everything isn't serious. You can have a laugh. Although the court is a horrible place, you'll still hear me and my colleague Elaine upstairs breaking our shite laughing and cattling, and the like court staff will laugh at us, and even the like judge will, because he knows we're, you know, you're allowed to have humour in.
Such a fair point.
Yeah.
Though, like the staff where I work have all been there a long time, you know, and I'm taking next week off because my manager said, you have time in lieu, you are not allowed to come in. So I'm actually not taking it. I was forced out of the building next week, you know. But in fairness, like where I work, everyone is just, they're great, like, and they're always checking in on you, and they'll sit down. There's literally what she's just said there, the whole thing, you know, like they say, like, leave your work phone in the desk, stop it, you know. There's people looking out for you, and you know, but I've worked in places where it's been the opposite, you know, and you might have an issue with something and you're looking for support, and they say, well, that's your job. And that's when you get the issues. And I think particularly with social workers, you know, if we're looking at the likes of TUSLA, HSE, the burnout rates there are just huge. You know, I've worked with families where the child could have had 6 social workers in 1 year, you know, and that's so destructive to them. And it's it's not a reflection necessarily on the social worker, it's a reflection on the organisation, because I found most of them great people, and not to go on a tangent now, but they're not let do what they want to do. They're just, I don't know why they bothered to go to college, because they've been told this is what you have to do, now you go and do it. Whereas they're all capable of, you know, assessing a situation, making the judgments and acting on it, but they're not let do that. Now I'm not saying that for every department in every organisation in TUSLA, but you know, I've worked with some really amazing social workers that have moved to other jobs, and you bump into them in their new jobs and they say, I just couldn't hack it there, and now they're doing great and they're brilliant people. But anyways, I will go on a tangent about that one. So
That's another. Sorry, O'Brien.
Brian, last question for you. How to stay in your job?
There's been a few, I suppose. One just comes to mind there, because there's a fella that retired out of the job a few years ago, and he'd only rang me maybe 2 weeks ago, and he was talking about a call again that sort of, I think, was the beginning of the end for him in the job. Without going into too much detail, it was a tender age boy. It involved a very, very traumatic suicide. As he said himself, that little boy went home with him that night. He can't drive certain routes because it reminds him of it. Like I said, this is a big, strong dude, you know, and it breaks him every day. So it's people like him that we have to watch out for. I've no doubt, as I always say, no one gets out of my job unscathed. And that's first responders in general. That's these guys, the guards, the paramedics, everything, soldiers that go abroad. They all carry a burden, and it's just, hopefully they become, the stigma breaks, that they just come, they talk, they train, whatever they need to do just to get outside their own fucking heads, you know. And I think it's we're getting better at it. At least we're talking about it now, whereas before we didn't. So it was just grunt, get on with it, and, you know, crack on, as they say. Hopefully them days are gone now, and, you know, even talking here, hopefully somebody sees it and reaches out. I mean, we've had a couple of suicides in this country in the last 12 months. One guy I knew. And if only he had reached out to somebody. I don't know what the situation was, that why he did it, but he did it. And again, as Eno said at the start there, it was a guy that you'd never think, you know. I suppose I'll just finish up by saying, a huge mental health advocate passed away last month. That was an ex-firefighter in Limerick. As everyone would know him as Pal Dwyer. Massive loss to the social media world alone with the positivity spread, and just rest in peace, Pal, and, you know, definitely thinking of his family.
Well said. Well done.